Welcome to the Holy Post. The Supreme Court has released two highly anticipated and controversial rulings about race, sexual identity, and discrimination. We talk about it all on this week's show. First, colleges and universities may no longer give preferential status to applicants based on their race. Is the end of affirmative action really the catastrophe that some are claiming? And then, a web designer will not be required by law to create websites for same-sex marriages. Is this ruling a defeat for LGBT rights or a victory for free speech? And why has the reporting about both these cases been so misleading? Also this week, a new government supercomputer will determine whether we should geoengineer the atmosphere to block out the sun. What could possibly go wrong? All of that, and Phil is still blowing things up in rural Michigan. As always, before we get into the show, a reminder about Holy Post Plus. This is the way that you can support the work of the Holy Post and get access to all kinds of amazing bonus material, including exclusive shows like Christian Asks and Getting Schooled by Kaitlyn Schiess, our monthly live streams where you can ask me and Phil questions live, the Holy Post Book Club that gets you free books and access directly to authors, exclusive merchandise, plus written, video, and audio content from the Holy Post pundits. It's a whole lot of stuff. You gotta check it out. If you're not yet part of Holy Post Plus, go to holypost.com to learn more. Okay, here is episode 573.
Hey there, welcome to the podcast. It's the Holy Post Podcast. I'm Phil Vischer. I'm here with Kaitlyn Schiess. Hi, Kaitlyn.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. And Sky Jitani. Hi, Sky.
Hello.
Hi. Sky was trying to convince me to join Threads. Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Threads, the new Twitter from the old Facebook.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's kind of young and innocent, and it's not yet been corrupted. So,
So I need to get there to be there when it falls, so I can feel the sense of loss.
Probably. Yeah.
Or to
I think there's a
contribute
life
to the
cycle
fall.
to these platforms.
Yeah. Well, how many have we seen? I mean, some were very short, like MySpace. It was just a few years.
Was that short? Oh.
It was short. It was short. It was a short life cycle.
I think it was short because it was early. The technology, the whole medium hadn't yet kind of been perfected. They got in early and they monkeyed around, and then Facebook came along and eclipsed it.
Yeah, ate their lunch, as they say. Are you suggesting that Threads is going to do that to Twitter?
I don't know. I mean, 100 million people have signed up already, and Elon Musk is threatening all kinds of retaliation for stealing traffic and users.
I'll kill you. I won't sell you a car or a ride to Mars if you sign up for Threads. That's what you should do. You can't buy a Tesla if you sign up for Threads.
I think we can live with that.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I'm okay with that. Yeah,
I'm okay with that. Okay, here's the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Kaitlyn.
This episode of The Holy Post is sponsored by Faithful Counseling. Life can be overwhelming. God made us for relationships and calls us to be in community, but people can be hard. Relationships can be strained, even our most important relationships. I've found it helpful at times to sit down with a trained therapist to talk things through, and Faithful Counseling makes that easier to do. Faithful Counseling can help you find a therapist that works for you. With more than 3,000 licensed therapists across all 50 states, it's easy and free to change counselors until you find the right fit. Plus, it's more affordable than traditional in-office counseling, and financial aid is available. Whether you're struggling with family conflicts, trauma, anxiety, stress, or depression, Faithful Counseling can match you with a therapist who can help. Continue growing into the best version of yourself. Visit faithfulcounseling.com/holypost and get the professional, faith-based counseling you need. They've even got a special offer for our listeners. Right now, you can get 10% off your first month at faithfulcounseling.com/holypost. Thanks again to Faithful Counseling for sponsoring this episode. This episode of The Holy Post is sponsored by Hiya Health. Hey, do you have kids? Do you care about their health? Of course you do. Most kids' vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk kids really shouldn't be eating. That's why Hiya was created. The pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin for kids. 0 sugar, 0 gummy junk, yet they taste great and are perfect for picky eaters. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste they love. And we've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you need to go to hiyahealth.com/holypost. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/holypost and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. And thanks to Hiya Health for sponsoring this episode. Kaitlyn, how was your 4th? Did you blow anything up?
No, I didn't.
That's disappointing.
I
And your
should have
father
blown
is in the
something up.
Space Force.
Yeah.
That's un-American, Caitlin.
I'm so sorry.
Does your
I
father...
did wear red, white, and blue, and that's big for
Okay.
me.
And were there any batteries and light bulbs that made anything flash? Was there any flashing?
No.
A necklace, earrings, flashing
No,
earrings,
no.
shoelaces.
Absolutely not.
Any glow-in-the-dark bracelets?
No, I'm not fun enough for that.
Wow.
I was in bed at like 9 o'clock.
Caitlin, we gotta talk.
Yeah. But you made up for it for me, didn't you, Phil?
I don't know that I made up for
Did you
it
blow
for
up?
you. I made up for it. I definitely. We had another good fireworks show in rural Michigan. Blew stuff up. My uncle was yelling down, "Is that falling on the roof? Is anything falling on the roof?" Of his house overlooking the lake where I was blowing stuff up. But no, we did not set his house on fire. I've been doing the fireworks. I've been in charge of the fireworks show there at the old family reunion for 30 years now, I think. And I've never set anything on fire. Thank you. And there have been
Honestly,
no injuries.
impressive.
There have
That
been
is
no
honestly
injuries.
very impressive.
30 years. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Not since my uncle set the woods on fire across the lake back in 72, I believe.
That's not why you took over?
No, I did not take over in 72 when I was 6. I did not at that point. But that's when my grandfather canceled the fireworks. No more fireworks. We set the woods on fire. That's bad. And at that point, fireworks were still illegal in Michigan. So not only did the Vishers set the woods on fire, but the Vishers were breaking the law while they set the woods on fire. This is a very bad look for law-abiding, church-going citizens. So the patriarch canned it, and then we started like the next year, just had sparklers, which was just depressing. Like, oh, we're on the back porch with sparklers. And then a couple of years later, a few little things show up. People are sneaking stuff in. Oh, I don't know, maybe Grandpa will be okay with this. How about this? Can we do this, Grandpa? And then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then suddenly we're doing a whole show again.
Yeah, it's the camel nose under the tent
It is
thing.
totally the pyrotechnical camel under the nose of my grandfather's tent of restriction and caution.
Okay.
Did you follow that, Caitlin?
Just barely.
If you want to incorporate any elements of that metaphor into your next book, I will give you permission.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, wait, when did your book come out? When did your book come out?
August 22nd.
That's
Soon.
still not here.
I
Did you
know,
get your
but
copies
it's very
yet?
soon. No, they told me weeks ago that they would be coming in a vague weeks. And I feel like every day I'm just like, wait, I'm waiting for a box outside my door. It hasn't happened yet.
Cheapers. Man.
Maybe they sent them to the wrong address.
Don't make me nervous about that.
Is it
Well, I mean,
Brazos?
you've moved around a bit.
Is it Brazos?
Yes. I have lived
Hey,
in one
Brazos.
place in Durham.
Hey, so we have to send a message to Brazos. Hey, Brazos, get Kaitlyn her books. Come on. How are
It'll
we
be
supposed
you
to
that does
promote
it,
them if
Phil.
we can't even touch them?
You know, Phil, you are the only one of the three of us that is not doing a book with Brazos. So I think you need to get on that.
Is it Brazos? Not Brazos.
Brazos?
Like
Brazos?
Bezos?
Brazos?
Brazos.
Jeffrey Brazos.
Yeah.
Brazos.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's a division
I
of
don't know.
Baker. Baker's
What
easier to
should
say.
you write, Phil?
I'm not going to write anything.
A manual to fireworks?
Yeah, a history of pyrotechnics in rural Michigan.
But it has to be Christian. So fireworks as a metaphor for spiritual formation.
How about
Do it.
as a metaphor for Christian nationalist militias in rural Michigan?
Yeah. Some Christians burn out too fast. They make a lot of noise and then they disappear. Others linger on, glowing like embers. How's that? That's pretty good.
That's the whole thing.
Sounds like a tweet, not a book.
Oh, crap. I'm already
You
already
workshop
done.
it a little
Okay,
more.
from the Department of What Could Possibly Go Wrong, supercomputer, new government supercomputer. That's always a good start. New government supercomputer will help decide whether to block the sun.
What?
A new supercomputer for climate research will help scientists study or attempt to study the effects of solar geoengineering, a controversial idea for cooling the planet by blocking the sun, redirecting the sun's rays by injecting human-made aerosols into the stratosphere. So basically squirting a lot of stuff way up high in the air that blocks the sun. That's what we're considering doing right now. The announcement comes after the Biden administration released a report a week ago Friday that offered measured support for researching solar geoengineering as a way to slow the rise of global temperatures. So the Center for Atmospheric Research has announced a new machine named Derecho will begin operating this month at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and will allow scientists to run more detailed weather models for research on solar geoengineering. Now, what are they? You might ask, why do they need to model it? What do they want to know? They want to know, could it also do bad things?
Yeah,
Of course it can. This is classic unintended consequences territory.
Critics of geoengineering say using aerosols and other substances to reflect sunlight away from Earth could lead to unknown disruptive weather patterns. Kaitlyn, you seem to be agreeing with this.
I just think it's hilarious that what you just read said that the Biden administration was offering measured support for research into this. They're like cautious that we should even research this. They're not cautious that we should do it. It's just like we should maybe look into it.
Yeah, maybe
a little
we
bit.
should. But that, that for a lot of people, that's like, oh, a big thumbs up. Big thumbs up from the president. Off we go. They also contend that solar geoengineering could result in a global dependency because temperatures could abruptly rise if the process is stopped. Oops, we ran out of our aerosols. Oops, next year is going to be 10 degrees hotter than this year. Oops, sorry.
What is it?
Yeah, do they distribute this through planes in the stratosphere that are spraying this stuff?
I assume, yeah.
What is the stuff?
The stuff is, it's just hairspray. It's just a
probably
whole lot of hairspray way
It's
up
probably
high.
like asbestos or something horrible.
And
Yeah,
it
that feels like an
it's-
important thing.
It stiffens the stratosphere so that sunlight can't get through. That's what the hairspray does.
It's probably whatever Donald Trump uses on his mop.
But it'll make the whole earth smell minty fresh. That's the upside that they don't talk about enough, is that they can put a little odor in it.
Like Banaka spray, remember that stuff?
Oh yeah. What happened to that? What happened to Banaka Blast?
What?
Yeah, Kaitlyn doesn't know what we're talking
It
about.
was a little mouth spray, a breath spray that was like a shot of explosion in your mouth.
It was very strong, mint.
Extremely strong. It was like aerosolized Altoids.
Yeah, and we used to challenge each other to see how many squirts we could do under our tongue.
Really?
Oh yeah. 'Cause it
Without
would burn
bleeding?
so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
blistering and bleeding. Oh, you guys had fun. You had so much fun when you were young, Sky.
I know. Back in the 80s,
All right.
we were wild.
So the new supercomputer will allow scientists to build and run intricate models to assess the risks tied to geoengineering, adding that slight changes to the atmosphere's composition could lead to large impacts, not just on rainfall patterns, her area of study, this one scientist, but on entire ecosystems, including human communities. So, could be good, could be bad. Could be good. could be bad.
You can almost see the movie script writing itself, where
Yes.
in an attempt to slow down global warming, humanity agrees to try this aerosol sun blocker, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah. They put it in the atmosphere, and it unknowingly triggers a new ice age because
Yeah,
they
we-
overdid it.
What did you do? We blotted out the sun. And you thought this
Or-
was a good idea? Well,
Or it attracts aliens.
to the smell?
Caitlin,
To
they're
the
already
minty,
here, Caitlin.
the
They're
minty
already
fresh
here.
smell? Oh, are they?
The appearance.
Okay, Sky, somebody
Yeah.
somebody stopped me in my coffee shop this morning to say they were listening to you and David French talking about aliens, and that
Caitlin, don't shake your head.
it was just kind of weird. It was like that. It's not. They didn't say they didn't like it. They just said, "Wow, they were really nerding out." That's what
Yeah,
they said.
I titled the episode Nerd
Yeah,
Fest
I know.
UFO edition. That should be ample warning to anybody
Okay.
who clicks play what they're in for.
Do you have a whole list of other topics that you're hoping to be able to sneak in here and there?
I only
when
do-
Kaitlyn and I are away.
I only do like one Nerd Fest a year with David. Like
the
one time it was
annual.
all on superhero movies.
Okay.
And we maybe did a Tolkien one at some point.
I
But
think you
some,
did.
Yeah.
I don't do it often, but I think I'm entitled once a year to a little nerd. And this one was actually, I think it had a lot of political, national defense, and theological implications. So it's not completely isolated to nerds. There's a lot of people who care about that topic.
Okay. So I'm moving on from that.
Please.
Back to my supercomputer. So a while back, this is why I'm a little nervous about this. A while back, Illinois was repaving highways almost entirely, or in very many cases, with asphalt, not with cement. And the reason is they were running a software program to tell them, based on, how much traffic goes on this road, what are the conditions, how much heavy trucks, so is it more cost effective to put asphalt down, which you can do very quickly, or to do new cement, which is very slow and much more expensive, but lasts longer. And so they were going on the recommendations of this software for, 10, 15 years. And then it wasn't working. And they figured out that the software had a bug, that it was wrong, that it was doing the math wrong, and that they had set up their road budgets and road policy for like a decade based on faulty software. That's what I worry about. It's like, but the
Yeah.
model said it would be fine. There was a bug in the model.
This is a perfect opportunity. This is a perfect opportunity for AI to destroy us, because an AI-driven supercomputer can put that into the algorithm, into the computing, and cause humanity to make a decision to basically wipe itself out. And that's like the premise of the Matrix.
And you're saying that would be bad?
Yeah.
Okay. My question about AI wiping us out is just always, why would AI want to wipe us out?
Well, why does it need us?
Why does it think it has a need?
We're pretty bad for the planet.
It's still not sentient.
Well, you're assuming advanced AI, actually, this is all
Okay.
theoretical, can develop
Yeah.
a sense of
Like your
self.
alien thing.
I'm not saying I'm on board
Sky's
with this.
alien thing.
I'm saying that the hypothesis is if it actually reached sentience and then it perceives humans to be a
Yeah.
threat to its existence, because the humans could unplug me, the humans could shut me down, the humans could do, then there's the desire for survival kicks in, and it's, well, I have to destroy humans in order to preserve myself.
Okay.
And that's where, the
Yeah,
sci-fi
like in the
world
movies.
kicks in.
yeah,
right.
that's been in movies for
Exactly.
50 years, but I don't how close are we to being there?
We're closer than we were a year ago.
I guess.
I don't know.
Are we though?
Have you messed around with some ChatGPT stuff? I asked it to do something the other day, and it was honestly the dumbest thing I've ever read. So I'm not that confident. That
Yeah,
we're-
but I don't know. ChatGPT is probably smarter than at least 30% of humans.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
and they
think
haven't been able to wipe us out yet. So what hope does ChatGPT have?
it's a good point.
Okay. I have to issue a correction. Last week, I was talking about the Wolf Boys Stephen and William, unrelated, but both very strong, outspoken Christian nationalists. And I said that William Wolfe had co-written a statement on Christian nationalism with Denny Burke. That was incorrect. Denny Burke was not involved in the writing of the statement. He pointed that out to me on Twitter. It was Dusty Devers. Dusty Devers. Remember we mentioned him before and said, we said his name would make a good country music singer. And in response to that, Dusty Devers actually wrote a country song about Christian nationalism and played it on his guitar on Twitter. So that's true. I'm not making that up.
I think that should be a general caution to us all about what we say.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for. Anyway, my apologies to Denny Burke. Denny Burke is not a Christian nationalist. He is, however, the president of the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood and Manliness and Womanliness. So he's a patriarchist. He's not a Christian nationalist. He's actually criticized kinism in particular, the Christian nationalist belief that you're more responsible to love your own ethnic group than other ethnic groups. And that's,
important.
Christian hospitality, of course. And he's been very critical about that online and has been attacked by the real Christian nationalists for being critical of kinism. So I don't want to paint him with that brush. Denny, I'm sorry. Dusty, nice song. I appreciate it. Keep writing songs. Music is good for everyone. But you're the Christian nationalist, not Denny. Okay. Now I feel better.
Thanks for the correction, Phil.
Yeah. Sky, is there anything that you need to correct that you've said in the last couple of weeks?
Not publicly, no.
Oh,
okay.
I am full of errors and mistakes, but I try to.
But I'm not going to own up to them in public.
No. I'm saying that
they're between
in my personal
and my Lord.
No. I'm saying in my own relationships and friendships and family, I am full of error, and I will try to do my best to correct those things.
You're full of error.
That too.
Okay. And Kaitlyn, of course, you haven't made any mistakes because you learned in.
I'm sure I have.
You learned in
only in German class.
I made a lot of mistakes in German class.
If there's one thing you learned in your years of debating experience is if you're going to say something wrong, say it so fast that no one can understand what you said. So.
Yeah, that doesn't really work for me anymore.
We have no idea how many mistakes you may make. Okay, big week in the Supreme Court. Big week in the Supreme Court. All the final cases came in, and some of them had pretty interesting implications that everyone's talking about. Everyone in the world is talking about them. Everyone, everywhere. Kids at amusement parks going on.
This is the only country.
Yeah. Yes. Everyone. Podcasts in England and Australia are all discussing the recent cases. Which one do you want to touch on first? We are not, would you say we're legal experts?
No.
I certainly hope not.
Okay.
No.
We would not say we're legal experts. But
we are casual observers reading what's out there.
Yeah, we're reading about it and we're listening to legal experts. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that we should bring it up. Okay, 2 cases. First, Harvard, UNC, affirmative action decision. They're officially now you cannot use race as a determinant for college admissions. Kaitlyn's saying maybe, kind of, sort of.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have pointed out that it used to be, right, the basis on which you could include race was like a box that you check. And the reasoning for this was not restitution for past injustice. It was for a diversity of a learning community that's like a good for everyone. Now, this case, to my understanding, determined that there's enough harm that that's not kind of a good enough reason. But you can include race in your admissions decisions if it's described in a student's essay as a part of their life experience, which sounds to me like, on one hand, like a good desire to say, we're not going to kind of stereotype particular races and assume you all have the same experience. We're going to pay attention to the particulars of your life. On the other hand, it basically takes what used to be more of a group question and turns it into an individual question. And then also kind of encourages students to have a reason to make that a part of their essay, whereas they might not otherwise have done that, which could be good or bad, but does encourage people, because schools still can make that an important part of their decision process. And so students might think that might be something the school would want to know and might be encouraged to include it in their admissions essay. So in that sense, it still can be a part of admissions decisions. It just can't be, you know, a lot of these schools, they pointed out in the case, even if they didn't have official quotas, it was remarkably similar every year, the percentage of different racial groups that were included in the school. And it seemed like they wanted to kind of check a box, and they wanted students to check a box in their admissions essays, and now they can't do that.
Yeah. So on the right, we have people saying, yes, finally, we can have a colorblind society and we can all be judged just based on our character and not the color of our skin. On the left, we have people saying, well, this is the end of making a just and equitable society. Now it's, you know, it's going to be all white kids in colleges again. Neither are, as is often the case, neither are really accurate. Some people said, you know, this is the court saying that you can't use race in any consideration for anything, which goes against the decision they made just a few weeks ago in the Alabama redistricting case, where they said, no, we are going to say that, you know, this gerrymandering can be rethought on the basis of racial composition of the districts they made, because in the state of Alabama, race is politicized, and political party is actually a stand-in for race, and race can be a stand-in for political party. So there are significant racial implications of how Alabama has been redistricting, and it is not a violation of the Constitution to take that into consideration. So one of the conclusions that I was listening to about this that I thought was the most helpful is that basically you're saying that your life experience and race is a part of your life experience. Your life experience can be a consideration. You know, you can say we want to get more kids into our school who come from under, you know, privileged areas, or who had to overcome all sorts of terrible things to get here, as opposed to, oh, you're of African descent, or oh, you're of Asian descent. So that means, you know, and people pointed out 60% of the world is of Asian descent, 60% of the world. So to say they're all the same, you know, and should have the same consideration, and Asians were being excluded in some cases from some of these schools because, you know, they felt they were overrepresented. And black people were being, you know, included regardless of their background. You know, so if you were the child of two wealthy doctors in the Upper West Side, and they were both African American, or even one was African American, you had a better chance getting into Harvard than someone else. So, Sky, did you share anyone's either alarm or great celebration on this?
Honestly, few things have enraged me more in the last couple months than the reporting on this case. It has driven me up the frigging wall at the hysteria that's gone on after this ruling.
Even more than the reporting on the next case?
Yes, even more on the next case.
Oh,
so
tell us,
I don't know,
Sky.
maybe it's because I feel somewhat close to this issue. I mean, when I was graduating from high school and applying to colleges back in 93, 94, I remember filling out these applications and having those boxes to check about your race. And at least back then in the 90s, it said on the application form, check 1.
Yeah.
Which just assumed you only belonged in one of those categories, which I do not. I belong in multiple categories. And so I did not check any of the boxes on my applications. And I actually wrote my college essay about how angry I was at the freaking application, and that it just didn't recognize people of mixed race background as legitimate. So the fact that the court ruled to get rid of that box checking, I think, is a huge win. But what's made me so angry is the way that, and this happens on the right as well as on the left, it depends on the particular case, but there were all of these reports coming from the media about it's the end of the world. Like, this is the end of justice for people of color in college admissions. And it's just flagrantly untrue. And there's a couple points that you've touched on already, but some others that we need to hit on. Number one, if Harvard and UNC had gone before the court and made this case about historic injustice, they would have won. If Harvard had gone in and said, hey, we as an institution have a long history going back to the 1600s of discriminating against people of color, and we are trying to right that wrong, and therefore giving some preferential admissions status to people of color, they would have won the case. That's exactly what was going on in the case you mentioned in districting in Alabama. Alabama has a history of racial discrimination against African Americans in voting, and therefore the court said, yeah, you need to consider that when you're making these districts. But that is not what Harvard and UNC said. What they said is, we just want a diverse student body because we think it's better for education, and therefore we should be able to look at race. But what the data proved is that they were actually pitting one group of color against another. They were discriminating against Asian Americans in order to benefit African Americans. And it's like, well, that seems kind of bonkers. So that's number one. But number two, and more importantly even, the hysteria coming out of the left on this was by shooting down affirmative action, you're going to give disproportionate admission to white kids again and not people of color. The state of California shot down race-based admissions in 1996. And California, last time I checked, is not the most conservative state in the union. And they still have an incredibly diverse student population at their state schools. They have figured out a way of admitting students without just looking at a bunch of boxes based on race. Texas shot down race-based college admissions to their state universities in 1997. And they have an interesting policy where any student at any public school who graduates in the top 10% of their class automatically gets admission into a Texas school, which means if you're at a predominantly Latino school or African-American school, if you're in the top 10%, you're in. And Michigan has also shot this. So I just think it's a nothing burger when you have some of the most diverse states in the country have shot this policy down for decades. For the Supreme Court to just make it nationwide, there's a lot of other ways to pursue diversity, including racial diversity, that's more nuanced and informative than just a bunch of checkboxes.
Yes.
So I think this is a victory
Okay.
for everyone. And those flipping out, I think, are using this for political purposes, trying to scare and motivate people on the left by making the Supreme Court out to be some kind of demagogic, undemocratic, tool of the right. And this happens on the other side all the time as well. I don't want to make it out just the left, but this one in particular is just kind of like, oh my gosh, give me a break.
To be fair, in the first few years after the state of California banned the use of race on admissions, the diversity of their state schools fell significantly.
Because they were trying to figure out an alternative system.
They had to come up with a new way to accomplish the same thing. So this should be now more achievable with less disruption, because you can look at the 30-year history of what California has done and what Michigan has done and what Texas has done and say, okay, what have you done that's worked? What have you done that hasn't worked?
Right.
And let's do those things. And I do. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this is probably good. And some of the things that Harvard was saying, this was kind of a way also to keep legacy admissions, going, which are overwhelmingly white.
And that's super annoying.
We'll make sure we get enough not white people in here somewhere using this system so that we can keep all of our legacy stuff going on, and sports scholarships for rich white kids that play lacrosse.
Let's be clear on what was going on here. Harvard wanted more African American students admitted, which is an admirable goal. In order to have space for more African American students, what they decided was, we are going to exclude Asian American students because we don't want to touch the kids of billionaires and millionaires and celebrities that are part of our legacy admissions who are predominantly white. If they really wanted to open up more space for African American students, they could have said, we're capping the number of legacy students we're letting in every year to a certain amount to open up that space. But they decided to basically give the shaft to Asian kids rather than the kids of white billionaires. And that is what caused them to lose this case. It wasn't about reparations. It wasn't about historic injustice. It was, how do we make sure really rich white kids can still get into Harvard without making us look racist? And they got called out on it.
Well, when you sum it up that way. Kaitlyn, do you agree? Agree? Disagree?
I mean, I agree with Sky, but I also think, some of the kind of overstated, it's the end of the world response is from people who make their money making really wild statements on cable news or social media. When I think about the average person who was really concerned about this, especially someone who finds themselves on the more like left end of the political spectrum, I do think it was rooted mostly in this really good desire to see, these injustices made right, not really maybe understanding that that was not what the policy was for, and maybe not understanding that there's a diversity of ways to actually achieve that, and that maybe we should rethink the ways that we have done it in the past, or at least we thought we were trying to do it in the past. And I do think it's just important to say that some of the celebration of this ruling from the right has also been rooted in this idea that we live in a meritocracy that just works the way that it should, and we don't have historic injustices that need to be remedied. We don't have structural barriers to these kinds of things. And so whoever is smart and works hard will get there. And so it's great. Affirmative action was actually reverse racism. Like, those kind of criticisms ignore the fact that our education system in general in the US, not just higher education, is a mess and does privilege people who have money. It does privilege white people, but that's often also tied to money and access and generational access, which is why it's also tied to race. And so I do think the good desire from people criticizing this is, I often think, rooted in this is a mess and it's going to take a lot of work to undo it. And this feels like a step back, even though I agree with Sky. I think, one, this doesn't change a ton for a lot of schools. And the things it does change, I think, are things that are good that need to be changed. But we need to continue having a conversation about both how to rectify the structural injustices and barriers to higher education that start really young. Like, who has access to learning to read at a young age? Who has access to the best kinds of early childhood education? Who can go to the best kind of high school? Who can get tutoring and SAT prep? And all of those questions are not questions that can be solved just by the policy that Harvard or UNC had previously had, and will require a lot more work to figure out how to do it. And as a side note, all of these injustice questions are a part of it, but then there's this other underlying question that I think also speaks to why people react so strongly to this one way or the other, is that we have a kind of messed up and an increasingly messed up relationship with higher education. If you spent any time on TikTok or Instagram, you will start to see all of these college acceptance videos where these, high schoolers are applying to all the Ivy Leagues and all of these big, important elite schools, and then getting all of the, responses back and their reactions. And I mean, the pressure that is on teenagers these days is more than it's been in the past. More of them feel like they're supposed to go to college than used to feel like they needed to go to college. It's harder to get into a lot of elite schools than it used to be. And the idea that everyone needs to do that, I mean, the kids, even in the youth group in my church, they're across the street from Duke, and a lot of the faculty from Duke are at the church. The pressure to go to a really good school is so high. And I think that's playing into people's reactions is parents have strong feelings about where their kids go. Kids are feeling pressure to do it. There also needs to just be a change in the way we think about higher education, what it's for, who needs to do it, what it's supposed to be good for the whole country and not just for the people that attend it. Those are bigger questions that, again, cannot be solved by either this ruling or the previous situation before the ruling.
That seems like a much bigger conversation.
I'm just looking out for these kids, y'all. It stresses me out watching what they go through. It's not good.
I having kids that age who are going through all that, I don't think it's wrong. I mean, some people want it to just be, hey, if I've got the grades and I got the test scores, I should be allowed in.
Yeah.
The reality is there are more kids with the grades and the test scores than they can fit at these elite schools. So there's got to be some other factors that get weighed in who gets in. And the court's simply saying you need to look at something more than just did they check a box next to a certain racial category. And I mean, I think the goal of a diverse student body is a good one. And it's a critical component of a good education, but there are so many other metrics of diversity than just the color of your skin. And why not consider geographic diversity? How many students are coming from rural backgrounds versus urban ones? How about immigration status? How many students are immigrants or the children of immigrants? Socioeconomic. How many come from lower economic income families and versus higher? Religious diversity. How many come from non-religious backgrounds? How many are deeply embedded in a religious tradition of whatever variety? All those kinds of diversity should be factored in. And if you do that, you will also get racial diversity. But to simply, I think what this ruling does is it forces college admissions folks to do harder investigation into the students they're admitting rather than just, oh, well, we've got X number from this category they're in, that's it, we cap it. you're going to have to work harder at curating a diverse student body, and that I think is ultimately going to be good for everyone.
And that you're going to have to work harder once you have that student body to actually make it a benefit to people. Because if you look at any of the history of any of these schools, just having a diversity, including a racial diversity of students, doesn't mean they're socially interacting. Like,
Right.
doesn't mean that you have an equitable community in which those people are integrated well and people actually have relationships across lines of difference. It's entirely possible for the school to check a box of, look at how diverse we are. And it's not a benefit to the students because you have not addressed the other problems those students are bringing in, their biases and like the ways communities get sorted naturally. And that's, again, a bigger thing for them to work on.
Does the church have anything to say about this, any role to play in it? Or is this an entirely secular matter that there's really nothing for us to say?
Kaitlyn?
I mean, I think everything I just said is also really applicable to churches. Like, we both replicate the injustices of the communities that we're in the sense that things like redlining mean that the communities that we are in are deeply segregated, and our churches reflect that overwhelmingly, sometimes even more than other institutions. And so I think these conversations about, like, what is the purpose of a community are questions we should be asking. What is necessary for us to address systemic generational injustices are questions we need to ask. And then these questions about education are questions for the church too. Like I said, this is not just a question about who gets into Harvard or who gets into, to Duke or whatever. These are questions about, are our communities places where children, regardless of their background and the resources available to them or their parents, can be well educated? And even if your child is not going to the local public school, do you feel as a community, does your church, even if a lot of the students in your church aren't going to the public school, do you feel like you are obligated to ask those kinds of questions, to contribute financially, to show up to help, to do whatever you can do to fix a problem that is far too big for any individual church to fix, obviously? But are those questions you're thinking about, that like there are justice questions that implicate our specific community in which we are a part of the community, and also the public schools and the other, charter schools and other options are a part of the purview of the church because we are for the life of the world, and that includes the specific community that we're in.
Can I bring up one last thing about this case that does really irk me?
Yes.
Like
Other than all the other things that
No. This is on the other side. This is a criticism from the left that I think is actually legitimate, and I don't quite understand it. Part of the ruling, which was written by Chief Justice Roberts, said that this whole strike down of affirmative action in the consideration of race in college admissions would not apply to federal military academies, meaning the Naval Academy, West Point, that kind of stuff. And he doesn't give any elaboration as to why. And given that the military is one of the first integrated institutions in our society, it was a kind of a pioneer in this whole issue. I don't understand why. And I think it was Justice Sotomayor who said in her dissent, why is it the government thinks diversity is important in the, I forget how she put it, in the bunker, but not in the boardroom? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great question. Why doesn't this apply to federal military academies?
Yeah,
and
well,
I don't
know. All right. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? If you disagree or agree, go to holypost.com, leave a message, let us know what you think we missed. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back with another exciting Supreme Court case.
This episode is being sponsored by AG1 by Athletic Greens. Some of you know that my dad is a doctor, and as I get older, he's always telling me to watch my weight and exercise regularly. But in the last few years, he's also been telling me to pay attention to my gut health. He's been persuaded by all the research saying that the biome of good bacteria that lives in our guts is critical to our long-term health. There's just one problem. I hate taking lots of pills and vitamins and supplements. And why do they always have to be so big? That's one of the reasons I was excited to try AG1 by Athletic Greens. AG1 is a foundational nutritional drink with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food ingredients. I take it first thing in the morning before I've had my tea and before I jump into my morning routine of writing my daily devotional. And I'll be honest, it tasted way better than I expected. I've been doing it for a few weeks now, and I feel great knowing I'm supporting my health and not having to gag down a bunch of giant pills every morning. And that's why I've stuck with it, because AG1 is a super easy daily habit. So, if you're looking for a simpler and cost-effective supplement routine, check out AG1 by Athletic Greens. And right now, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/holypost. That's athleticgreens.com/holypost.
Today's episode is sponsored by Sundays. This is Phil. I have a dog. You have a dog. We love our dogs, and we gotta feed them something. Fresh food with human-grade ingredients is a better way to treat our dogs than that old bag of whatever that stuff is. Sawdust and cow bones? I have no idea. But fresh pet food is expensive and inconvenient, and that's where Sundays comes in. No, not the day. The new dog food company that makes air-dried dog food from a short list of human-grade ingredients. It's healthy, with beef, chicken, and digestive aids like pumpkin and ginger. It's convenient. Unlike other fresh dog foods, it's zero prep, zero mess, and zero stress. Sundays is shelf stable and ships right to your door. And it's affordable, costing 40% less than other healthy dog food brands because they don't waste money shipping frozen packages. We've got a special offer for our dog-loving Holy Posters. Get 35% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/holypost or use the code HOLYPOST at checkout. That's sundaysfordogs.com/holypost. Upgrade your pup to Sundays and feel good about the food you feed your dog. And thanks to Sundays for sponsoring this episode. Okay, welcome back. Second story, second case, another big one. 303 Creative, the lady. Colorado, boy, they're just mixing it up when it comes to baking and making and things for gay people or not. And this was the big one everyone was waiting for. 303 Creative, woman who doesn't make wedding websites, but wants to make wedding websites, and was wondering if she would run afoul of Colorado's strict anti-discrimination law if she refused to make a website for a same-sex marriage, but made other wedding websites. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they said, no, they cannot stop you from refusing to make a yeah, that was did you like that? Yeah. No, stop, not refuse. You don't have to make a website for a same-sex marriage if you don't want to make a website for a same-sex marriage. And this has gone cuckoo crazy online because people say, oh, so you're saying it's okay for businesses not to serve gay people. Yeah. And that's where, no, that's not what this is about.
Which would be bad.
That would be bad.
Yeah.
No, you can't. Restaurants can't say they're not going to serve interracial couples. You know, there's all sorts of service laws. This was a free speech case. It was about compelled speech. So what's the difference, Sky? I bet you've read up on this.
Yeah. I've been reading up on this for years. This is a great example of whoever gets to define the question gets to own the story. So if the reporter or whoever's writing about it decides that this is an issue about LGBT discrimination, if that's the question that's being presented, then it looks like the court is saying you can discriminate against LGBT customers. The case that was actually brought before the Supreme Court was not about discrimination based on sexual identity or orientation. It was a question of, can the government compel someone to create speech they disagree with? And once you put it in that category, it's a totally different thing. So in this case, the 303 Creative company is not denying a customer any service based on their identity. They've said if a gay, transgender, whatever person comes in and asks them to create something, they will serve that person. What they did say is anyone who comes in and asks to create a same-sex wedding website, be that customer straight or gay, they would get refused, not based on who they are, but based on the product they are asking for. That's a case of speech discrimination, not identity discrimination. And for the government to tell a private citizen, you must create speech that we want you to create, is a violation of the First Amendment. That's all this is. No one is allowed to discriminate. No business is allowed to discriminate against an LGBT person because of their identity. That is not what this ruling allows. But again, it's being presented that way in the media because it's a great way of stirring up tribal animosity and this sense of virtuous victimhood. And everyone's trying to, I call it tribal triangulation, where everyone's trying to use the Supreme Court against their tribal enemy in the political sphere. And it doesn't matter if what you're reporting is true or false. We're just going to angle it the way that benefits my tribe. And the right has been guilty of this for decades, taking cases that they perceive to be against religious liberty or perceive to be against abortion, whatever, and spinning it and to freak people out on the right. And now we're seeing it, because the court is more conservative, we're seeing it being used by people on the left.
Kaitlyn, what did you make of it? Was Sky right, or is he totally out to lunch?
No, I think he's right. I mean, I think people who aren't paying attention to the particulars of it miss that part of what's at stake here is making a website a service, or is it a form of speech? The same has been, like, question has been asked about all sorts of things. Like, this is part of the cake decorating question. This is part of the wedding photographer question. This is the, we're not seeing a Supreme Court case where a restaurant owner doesn't want a gay person to come into their restaurant. Like, that's settled. We're not concerned about that. We might be practically, like, to be honest, that could be happening and it's not being taken seriously. That's totally possible. But that's not a legal question that is still up for debate. This was a question about, distinct from a service, this expression, this form of expression that is the making of a website. And that's an open question. I think the other thing that's at stake here, maybe not legally, because again, we are not legal experts, but definitely is at stake in the conversations people are having about this, that I'm hearing at church, online, etc., is at the heart of a lot of these debates is a question of, like, what we think is an acceptable opinion to disagree with someone about. And there are certain things, there's a reason we keep jumping to the interracial marriage example, because we collectively, for the most part, hopefully, have decided that being against interracial marriage is not an acceptable opinion for our particular pluralistic society. That's a good thing. I think what people are running up against and don't know what to do with is that we don't have a settled answer to the question of, is it an acceptable difference of opinion to be okay with same-sex marriage or not? We feel very differently about that. We feel very strongly about that. And so making analogs to other things is difficult because we're always negotiating this as a society, as a community. And it's difficult for some people to grapple with because it seems obvious to them what the answer is, one way or the other. Not just the answer to, is same-sex marriage okay or not, but the answer to, is this an acceptable difference of opinion where you should respect my opinion and I should respect yours? Or is this a moral question in which, no, I don't respect your opinion about that. It's immoral. It's wrong. We can't just coexist well together.
Right.
That's what we're trying to negotiate.
It seems like we're having a hard time ever saying, well, let's just agree to disagree. Because we've become so extreme in our positions, and our worldviews are so different. You know, if I'm coming to all of this with the Bible in my hands and I'm looking for verses in the Old Testament that tell me what to think about tattoos and women and eating pork, and and then I'm letting go of Scripture if I let go of those positions. And if you're coming from the other side that says, well, the arc of the universe is towards justice as I define it in my progressive circle of friends in New York City or San Francisco or LA. And so justice means everyone gets to do whatever they want all the time. And that's what justice is. And so you're opposing the arc of the universe, the moral arc of the universe. It's really hard to compromise when we're coming from radically different moral frameworks.
Yeah. Okay, but to build off of Kaitlyn's example of interracial marriage, my understanding of this ruling is that applies here too. Like, if a website designer is profoundly racist and does not believe in interracial marriage, and somebody comes and says, hey, I want you to create a wedding website for my interracial marriage, they have the right to say no, because that's compelled speech. They can't deny somebody service because of their race. They can't deny them service because they are in an interracial marriage, but you can deny the creation of speech that you disagree with. That's protected in our Constitution. You may not like it, you may not disagree with it, but it is protected. And that's threading the needle here of, I mean, speaking personally, I don't think any American should be discriminated against by any business because of their race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, country of origin, any of that. I also believe that the government should never have to compel any American to create speech they disagree with, even if it's speech that I find abhorrent. So those are the two beliefs that we have to hold in tension here. And that's what I think this case did. And that's so easy for one side or the other to neglect to share the other half of that and only focus on the part they don't like and cry victimhood in it without looking at the full picture. I think we should all celebrate that we live in a country that the government can't tell us something we have to say or create.
There was an interesting debate about this on Bari Weiss's podcast. What's her podcast called? Do you remember the Bari Weiss podcast?
No.
Sky will look it up and tell me what it's called. I forget. I forget. But anyway, they had 3 different legal experts, one of whom was Sarah Isker from, David French's good buddy, who was the more conservative. And then there was a more liberal legal expert. And they were debating this case. And
It's
the more
called Honestly.
Honestly, with Bari Weiss. That's right. The more liberal legal person was arguing that, well, if this means you don't have to provide this service for gay people, then how is it different than a gay person walking into a nail salon and them saying, I'm not going to do your nails for your wedding because it's a gay wedding? And Sarah was, and actually both of the other experts were quite firm in saying that would be illegal because that's simply providing a service. It's not a creative expression. It would be the equivalent of someone walking in and saying, I want you to paint swastikas on my nails. And you saying, I'm not going to paint swastikas on your nails. That's an expression I'm unwilling to be associated with. So, but then where it gets messy, and I think they were probably rightly annoyed by this, is the decision doesn't make any effort to define creative expression. There's just zero, and that's such a gray area, so it's almost like there's just every case is going to have to be litigated to decide, is this creative expression? Because they did say pretty clearly, if she sold wedding templates for websites, she could not refuse to sell a wedding template for a same-sex marriage. Because the creative expression is already done. There's no unique creative expression in that case. But because everything she does is a custom website, it's creative expression. It's asking a sign painter to paint a portrait of Hitler on the side of a building. And you say, you know what, I'm not going to do that.
Right. And that's exactly what came up in the cake case some years ago, where Jack Phillips, the baker, said to the gay couple he would be happy to sell them any cake that's on the shelf that he's already made, but he wouldn't create them an original design, that celebrated 2 men being married. And that's exactly the difference. I won't create something that's compelled speech that celebrates something I disagree with, but I'm not going to discriminate against you as a customer based on your identity. I'm happy to sell you anything else or make you any other cake that you might want, birthday cake, whatever it might be. And that differentiation between service and expression is important. And the law, there's still some ambiguity there, and we need to figure that out. But I think in general, most Americans agree with both sides of that. People should not be discriminated against based on their identity, and the government or state should not be able to force any American to express something they don't want to express.
Kaitlyn, help us out.
I think that's right. I mean, I just, back to what Sky was saying earlier, I think you're totally right about the legal question, in the sense that I want people to not be discriminated against, and I want people to not be forced by the government to make some form of expression. I think what this is animating, though, is not just the legal question, which I think you're right, more people can agree on that than might be perceived by the people arguing about it online. But I do think at the heart of this is still this question of not just what can I be compelled or not compelled to do, but what do I think is an acceptable opinion that I think is wrong but can still exist in the world? What do I think needs to actually just be taken out? And I feel perfectly comfortable with the legal protections against compelled speech. And yet I would agree with lots of people. I don't think it's not an acceptable, socially acceptable thing for you to say, I don't make wedding cakes or websites or whatever for interracial couples. I would be like, no, that's immoral for you to hold that position, and it's wrong and bad. What I think we're uncomfortable with is that we don't know where the line is between that, which I can just unambiguously say, even if you're legally protected to do it, I think it's wrong and bad. It's a character flaw. It's a moral flaw. And this other question about same-sex marriage, where some of us would say, I think that's a difference of opinion. You're trying to really hold to what Scripture says, or another religious tradition. And it's not just Christians who might need these kinds of protections. You have sincerely held religious beliefs. They are different from mine. You have different reasons for the positions you've come to, versus some people who would say, no, that's in the same category as what you just said is just morally wrong. And I think we're uncomfortable, as is very understandable, with the fact that we don't know where that line is. Like we haven't settled that. And it makes all of these conversations really difficult, because even if someone could agree with you, Sky, and me saying, yeah, I want these kinds of protections, when it comes to the conversations that we have that are not about legal particularities, but they're about our judgments about other people, we're uncomfortable with the fact that we don't agree with what kind of categories to put those kinds of decisions in. They don't all fit in the same ones that we would want them to be.
Yeah, I think what complicates this even further is 10 years ago, the majority of Americans did not believe same-sex marriage was morally okay. Barack Obama and Joe Biden did not believe same-sex marriage was okay. Like, this has been an incredibly rapid transformation of view. And now there's some segment of the population that says, if you aren't on board with same-sex marriage, you're morally reprehensible. It's like, wow, that happened at breakneck speed. And there's no room for transformation of views, no compassion in the slowness of people who are adapting to this. There's no willingness to share the public square with people of traditional religious convictions, not just conservative Christians. We're talking about Jews and Muslims and Hindus and numerous other religious sects who have a very clear definition of marriage that does not include two men or two women. There isn't a willingness to share the public square with those who hold divergent views on this. And the fact that it's been pushed so quickly and so rapidly is what I think is challenging here. But that's separate from the legal question. Yeah. And I agree with you. That's where the tension is. But we can't get those two things muddled.
But I sympathize with the people. I sympathize with the people like you just described, who are like, this has changed so fast, and now I'm morally abhorrent. And that, I also sympathize with the people who are like, once you have moved this mentally into this other category, if you're comparing it to racial injustice, for example, or any variety of things that you just have put in the category of like, this is morally abhorrent, I understand the people who are like, no, I don't compromise. Because I would feel similarly if it was like, I'm in a church and there's someone in leadership who says, I don't marry interracial couples. I'd be like, no, that's not a conversation. Like, we don't try to compromise on that. That's wrong. So I sympathize with the people who feel that way about same-sex marriage, because they're just trying, they're to them that's in this category, and so you don't compromise, you don't have a. But again, I also sympathize with the people who are like, this has changed really fast. I mean, I think at the end of the day, part of what's going on here is we want it to be easier than we have truly entirely different approaches to what's right and good in the world. We have different ideas about what is ultimately valuable and what's not. We want it to just be true that other people just misunderstand, or like they haven't read the books we've read, or they just don't. But like at the end of the day, we really do have some fundamentally different convictions about the world, and living together with that is harder than I think some of us have been like led to believe.
Right. And isn't it, wouldn't you say that part of that speed of how fast public opinion has changed is what's created such a strong backlash, where there are so many people that are digging in so hard, and elevating gender and sexuality to these are now the number one issues facing the world today, and poverty and everything else, and rising infant mortality and maternal mortality in the U.S. We don't never mind any of that stuff because Obergefell happened, and now everything has gone to heck in a handbag. So there's and it was the same thing we talked about on abortion. If there's a big shift suddenly, like, oh, wow, Roe v. Wade was just overturned, now we can do all sorts of things that we couldn't do last year, there's going to be a backlash. And, the less the less we care about the people that disagree with us going into it, the less we should be surprised when they don't care about us coming back the other way. And that's not an argument for utilitarianism, but it is an argument for Christian love of neighbor to say, oh, you feel very strongly about this, and I am affecting you in the position I'm taking. That doesn't mean I'm going to change my position, but it does mean I'm going to try to take it in a way that takes into consideration, how your point of view in this matter. Yes, no, maybe so.
I just think anytime you start to think the only way someone could hold this position I disagree with is if they're evil or stupid.
Yeah.
You like take a beat and think about it and really try and evaluate if there are other reasons they might hold it. There are a small amount, like on the fringes, of positions that you really might just have to be stupid or evil to hold. The majority of the ones that we are actually talking about in our country today, if you are feeling like, no, the only way you disagree with me is if you're evil or stupid, that's not right. Like, you're going to have to do some more research. You're going to have to talk to some people. You're going to have to get some empathy, because
Can I just talk to the
true.
people that agree with me that those other people are evil and stupid? Because
No,
that's
please
way
don't.
more fun.
Please don't.
Way more fun. All right. Sky, last thoughts?
No, I don't know if I want to open up another can of worms, but I think the difference here, like you brought up, the rapid change in abortion, whether it was 1973 or last year with Dobbs. Those kinds of rapid changes do provoke a backlash. I think what's a little different here is the rhetoric before Obergefell, coming from the right, was, hey, if we legalize same-sex marriage, it's not going to end there, and it's the slippery slope argument, and it's going to lead to all these other things. And there were a lot of people, obviously on the left, but a lot of moderates too, and I'd count myself among them, that were going, oh, please, like, the slippery slope thing, you roll your eyes, it's always the end of the world, and and yet I think there's a case to be made that since Obergefell, we have seen that slippery slope in a way that has surprised some of us who thought it was more rhetoric than reality. There's a headline out today that Brown University, going back to Ivy League schools, 40% of students at Brown University now say that they're not straight. 40%. And we've talked about this on previous shows, the massive increase in teenagers who are identifying as transgender or non-straight in their sexual identity. Like, we have seen this massive rise in the last couple of years. So I think if you're an average American and you think, yeah, live and let live, gay marriage is fine, it's it doesn't bother me at all, and I have dear friends or family members who are gay, and I want them to be able to experience marriage and all the equal rights. I think a lot of Americans fit into that category. And now you go almost a decade on, you're going, wait a minute, what is going on in the broader culture here, where all this anti-woke stuff and all of the the transgender movement, all this, and a lot of people are going, well, I wasn't in for this. I didn't know this is where it was going to lead. And that fuels a lot of the anti-woke stuff and sort of the extreme reaction on the right.
Yeah, and I think some of the headlines that are really catching people's eyes are the law just passed in Michigan that you can get fined up to $10,000 for misgendering someone.
Right.
So that's a level of state involvement in policing, a controversial issue that probably would make a lot of people uncomfortable.
Right. So whether you're talking public school curriculum or, state fines on this kind of stuff, some people are looking at it and they're using this to say, we need to go all the way back and maybe rethink that gay marriage thing, which is probably an overreaction then in the other direction. Mm-hmm. But this is all fodder that's being used by political activists on the extremes to terrify people.
Other people, some of our friends, the wolves, for example, are saying this is why we actually need to alter democracy so that it favors, like it did in the very early years, it favored just white landowners, for example. Although they wouldn't say white, but they would. I've heard people say it should just be landowners who are married, men married, own land with children should be the only ones in America who are allowed to vote. So that is a reaction to this is what you get when you let everyone vote. You get chaos and fines for misgendering people.
Right. Overreaction again. Kaitlyn.
I mean, it is. I do think, though, all of this, again, is indicative of the fact that as much as we desire to live in a pluralistic society and we want to leave room for people's various expressions and different kinds of communities, and there are some questions of deep importance, of like intimate importance to us, they aren't just left up to individuals. Like, they have effects on us as a society, and we're going to have to negotiate through, and we're going to have to actually make compromises. Like, part of what's behind this on both the right and the left is my vision for what a good world is should just dictate everything. And then the reaction to that sometimes by people is, let's not have conversations about these big questions of the vision of our communal life we should have. And neither of those is the right answer. You're going to have to give up some stuff. You're going to have to compromise. But the only way that we do that honestly and faithfully, including as Christians specifically, is if we say, no, I want everyone to bring their full vision of what a communal life is together. I don't think someone should use force to coerce other people into that. But I do think we need to have conversations about it. I think all the time about my next door neighbors and Muslim family who their entire life in the world is, especially for the women, it's very visual that they have religious commitments that affect their whole social life. I think we are better off if we really actually get into the weeds of negotiating what those differences are, rather than either pretending like they don't exist, pretending like some of them are obviously stupid or evil and shouldn't be involved, or coercing people to just go along with the thing that we have. There are other options. Like we have imperfect, but we have mechanisms for trying to negotiate those big kinds of questions, and we probably won't work them out on Twitter.
But if you're sending people to Congress not to legislate, but to build social media platforms and become outrage jockeys, it makes it even harder to do anything, which is why we end up doing everything in the courts. Because we send crazy. Liz Cheney the other day said our biggest problem right now is we keep electing idiots. So that's kind of a strong way to say it. But people that want to throw bricks through windows more than actually solve problems is a big issue. Okay, last thought, Sky. Then we're going to wrap it up.
What is interesting though is, recently, the Congress did pass marriage protection for same-sex couples because there was a concern following Dobbs that the conservative court might rethink Obergefell. And Congress, remarkably, which can agree on very little, agreed and passed a law that's protecting same-sex marriage. So there was a case where something that was originally decided by the courts and was controversial in 2014, Congress has caught up with, the American people have caught up with, and said, no, we want to make sure this is protected regardless of who's on the Supreme Court. So that seems to be...
What that really came down to was that 90% of Republicans opposed it rather than 100% of Republicans opposed it. So it passed.
Yeah, but it was enough. And there's a case where if Congress actually functioned the way it should, which is taking the views and beliefs of the American people and debating them and compromising on them and figuring out what's best for the if Congress actually did that, we wouldn't be as polarized when these different decisions come out from the Supreme Court, from 9, as everyone likes to say, unelected people in black robes. So it's a very broken Congress that is causing this dysfunction. And that's a whole nother discussion around districting and primaries and our election system.
So what should the church do? Sky? What can pastors do? What can ministry leaders do?
The church should embody an alternative community that is not driven by a view of tribalism that says my group has to dominate, but one of consider others better than yourself, take on the mind of Christ, serve one another, and put the interests of others ahead of your own. That's what the church should do, is be an alternative community. But we can't expect America to be the church. And often that's what Christians get caught up in, is I want the whole society to be what the church is supposed to be. And when it isn't, we flame throw everybody outside of the church. And that's a problem.
Okay, last chance, Kaitlyn. What can the church do to help?
Honestly, the church can be deeply involved in the immediate community that it is in. Obviously, there are national questions that are important, but I think a lot of us are wasting a lot of our time going down social media rabbit holes or watching a lot of C-SPAN and thinking that's political involvement when there are hungry people in our city and there are divisions that we could offer some real perspective on that we are absent from because we're spending too much time paying attention to big national questions that are cooler and sexier instead of the problems in our actual neighborhood.
I feel like you're talking about me, Kaitlyn. Are you talking about me?
I think if you think I'm talking about you, that's a you thing and not a me thing. Like you should figure out why you think I'm talking about you.
Oh, you just threw that. Ooh, that was like jujitsu move. Use my own momentum against me. Wow, very impressive. Okay, that's our show for today. We don't have a guest. We just wanted to talk about lots and lots of news. So there you go. Now you know what to do about all the latest issues, including if you disagree with us, go to holypost.com and tell us why. And Kaitlyn will read them all and respond personally by coming over to your house and cooking you bread.
No, I will not.
Nope, she won't.
Absolutely not.
I was Sky. Sorry.
Happy to.
I read it wrong. It was Sky. Sky will come to your house and make you a lemon drop martini. Okay, we're wrapping up. Thanks. There's more. Do we have anything new coming out on Holy Post Plus this week that you know of? We got a new Kaitlyn school, Kaitlyn Schiess, or Christian Asks, or
We've got to.
we must. Something's coming out. Something's always coming out.
We have a new Getting Schooled on Rapture Fiction.
Rapture
Hey!
Fiction. Oh, that's fantastic. Kaitlyn Schiess schools you on the history of Rapture Fiction. It's fantastic. It's good and you get class credit at Duke if you listen to it.
That's right.
You get, and you can show up for graduation. Just show up, bring any kind of gown. They'll let you walk at Duke. Say, I listened to Getting Schooled with Kaitlyn Schiess. Where's my stinking diploma? And that's how that goes. And then, please have someone record you doing that and send it to us. Because we definitely want to see it. Okay, thanks everybody. We will see you next week. Bye. The Holy Post Podcast is a production of Holy Post Media. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by supporting us at patreon.com/Holy Post. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele, and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much more.